Hey everyone, RemanX here, and I've been struggling on how to make this video because there's been a lot of discussion about this team, the Hellfire team coming to Marvel Strike Force, and obviously the Envoys made their reveal videos, but I've been going in depth and trying to anticipate what we're going to see from the upcoming raid, how to really build these characters, and really which ones to focus on, and with that we're going to get right into it. So stay tuned. I'm going to drop my picture out of here. You're just going to hear my voice as we get into this thought experiment here and talk a little bit about what characters to build, what the upcoming raid will look like, and maybe Overpowered Tier 2 is coming to the game sooner than we think. All right, let's get into it. So one of the very important parts about this is when they introduce a new raid, they try to introduce a new challenge. And one of the ways they do that is they make older characters less viable. But you can sort of see how these new teams are going to work when you're looking at the kits. So let's talk a little bit about something that's been happening with Vigilantes, Thunderbolts, and now this team, which is going to be our Mutant Raid team. And that is, we can highlight it in a couple different ways. One of the first ways is we're going to be using the enemy character's power against them. So one of the things about this with the mind control from Emma Frost being once per turn, potentially as quickly as Sebastian Shaw's being hit. And then Madeline Pryor with her her retaliate attack that basically mind controls the highest damage target to attack the enemy. These are important to understand that we're really using the power of the enemy team against them, so they're probably going to be quite powerful. And the reason why we know this is how the team gains energy. And so just like Vigilante, these guys gain energy on kill. So basically, we have to look at which character is going to provide the most damage, and that's typically from their stats on their attacks, how often they're going to do their attacks, how many targets they hit, etc., etc. So let's start with that. So right here, we're going to talk a little about this is basically generate one ability energy when an enemy dies. So you have to kill in order to get turn meter. I mean, it's not turn meter, in order to get these abilities up. So you're going to start each wave with his special and then his ult ready shortly afterwards, depending on if you get a kill relatively quickly. So the thing about this is it's 320 base damage. We're going to talk about that in a little bit different. But then we also have the 250 piercing. Now, what this does is Infernal Barrage sets the team up for potential kills. The speed bar is important. By the way, speed reduction is not something that can be resisted. It is one of the few features that does not require focus to reduce speed. That happens regardless of the character's focus. So it is not a focus or resistance based attack. Okay, so this is important to understand. So reducing speed always happens. So this tells us a little bit about how we have to build him, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So obviously you're probably familiar with this kit, really cool kit, probably number 3 on the team, maybe number 2. And then we're going to talk a little about why I think this is going to be important because of how the team works everywhere else as well. So let's get into it. So obviously the 2 older characters are not necessarily not as good, but they provide more support for the team than they do actual power. They're gonna, when they do their attacks, they're going to be significant. Because, you know, this team only has sustain from their drain, which means heal block is going to be highly challenging for this team. So that's why Emma taking multiple turns, keeping immunity up very frequently, is going to be absolutely important. And that's the thing about this team is you're going to see a lot of the newer characters in this raid. And we're going to go over why this is important in a second here. So Azazel, probably 2 or 3 on the team. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we go to Sebastian Shaw. Now, again, when we look at his abilities, getting charged, applying stun, having that be something that he could potentially retaliate from, or Emma's ability calling him to do that when he's called for that attack will be absolutely powerful. But making sure he's charged when that happens may not always be possible, especially if you're slowing the enemy team with speed bar, slow by flipping speed up, etc., or completely stunned, you may not be getting as much charged unless you're underpowered. So there are going to be a couple different ways to build this team. So when we're looking at this, he also has piercing, but only on his large scale attack and only for primary and adjacent. That's 375, which in my estimation is the high end of moderate damage. Actually, it's probably the low end of high damage when you're thinking about multiple targets. I think moderate used to be what, 200 to 250 or something like that. This is their version of high end damage, so we'll see those numbers. So he's not a terrible character, but probably 2 or 3 tied with Azazel. And again, depending on how many stars we're going to get from this and how easy it is to acquire, we're going to get into it. But the character that is probably one of the best characters coming to the game in Marvel Strike Force, in my opinion, at least potentially for a while, is this character, Rachel Summers. And the reason why I say this is she is phenomenal. And the main reason why is because she has lower cooldowns than the rest of her team. So you can already see that we're going to be reducing speed with her attacks relatively frequently as long as we're scoring kills. And we're also going to be using this massive damage between our target and adjacent targets. So 500 piercing used to be the top end of like a Black Bolt ability, right? For his AoE. So this is very powerful. Important to know that this is going to be applying immunity. And then the speed bar for self. So her kills are going to be absolutely vital to keep this team rolling. So it's easy to see that it's Rachel Summers to the moon. Not only is she just a good character, she also has a couple of quick things that she does everywhere. You know, you could talk a little bit about the idea that any enemy getting slow is immediately getting pinged for 15% speed bar and getting trauma applied. The enemy turn that character is speed up or stun attack for 250 piercing. So she's going to be pinging her attacks. So she is absolutely the workhorse on this team when you're talking about overall power. So Azazel, cool character. I've actually thrown a couple of cores into picking him up, but I am going to make sure that all my currency is going for Rachel because she is going to be very, very powerful and is the power horse in the team. So Rachel Summers to the moon. So part 1 of the thought experiment done. Rachel Summers, size matters, right? So, she's definitely going to be the piece de resistance on the team and the character that you're going to focus to build as high as possible. Pretty much day 1, right? She's going to be carrying this team. Azazel just needs to stay alive. Obviously, we need to keep stars on their tank because he's going to be taking the majority of blows, but he's going to have a lot of armor and resistance. So we take a look at that. So really, I think when we look at this, one of the things I just want to show is the stats table. And what this is going to say is this new raid will feature newer characters that specifically shut down some of the abilities and passives of the older raid teams. They're going to be quickly disabling our Mystic team, our Tech team, and our Mutant teams, and potentially seeing some struggles even in some of the other lanes as we have to contend with just overall some of the new characters that can slow down power. So most of the players, if you're a moderate spender, a whale, or a kraken, you'll probably sim these near day 1. But if you're a free to play and even a casual spender, you're probably going to want to listen very carefully. The new raid is going to have a ton of armor, and we're seeing this because most of the new kits right here have a ton of piercing damage on the characters. Now remember how armor works is it basically is a straight damage reduction for the amount of damage being done. Factor that with defense up, and what we're going to talk about in a minute, my projection of what the new Overpowered will look like. You're going to have to bring your team up to contend with higher power teams. So likely what's going to happen is we're talking about 2 new purple ISO categories come into the game, we're talking about making sure that your gear tier 18 characters are able to contend with the gear tier 20 that are in these raids. So we'll probably won't see these raids will probably have difficulty scaling, and the harder scaling will come out with either purple ISO or higher levels in gear, etc., to challenge players, but it also might be overpowered, and we're going to get into that in a minute. So again, you're seeing high damage, and these are all characters that we should see pretty regularly here. We can see that Marvel Strike Force is building an innate power tier into the game as new characters come out. The next set of characters that come out in a category, whether it's support, etc., are coming out with a little bit more health, a little bit more power, so that it's more of a gradual scaling. So as you adopt new characters, new teams, they'll be just a little bit more powerful than the characters that came before it from a straight damage, etc. Now their kits are different, so don't remember, just because they might be number one on the damage scale here doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be the best kit on the team. So just be careful. That could be misleading when we're looking at this as overall. But just knowing that we're seeing these high damage numbers, these high armor values, and more importantly, the high health values, we can understand that the raid is going to be more challenging from a perspective of how to do damage. Now, when I say overpowered, the reason why I talk about this is when we look at these effects, really overpowered tier 1 was, I don't want to say lazy because that's not the right way to, it was just a stopgap measure, was to make it offense up. If you look at overpowered 1 is literally offense up. And it's done on the outside of the equation. So that's why when you're facing a team that's at that overpowered 1, you're taking significantly more damage than you would normally. Obviously, that's going to be negated by armor damage, armor damage reduction, etc. But the natural progression of this is probably going to be defense up. And the reason why I say that is because it just makes the most sense. It's probably the easiest for us to understand. So this means that, well, it's going to be important to have focus on characters. So we may see a resurgence of skirmisher characters. We also may see things like the idea for damage when you're talking about both the formula for damage reduction on some of the characters and on top of the actual armor of some of the characters. This will be significant when combined with targets that spawn with defense up, which is why it's going to be so vital that some of these really powerful characters are getting mind controlled and attacking each other. So Vigilante will still be able to do the raid, but they might struggle a little bit at lower levels, although they will be copying effects, etc., which makes them very powerful. Obviously, when we're talking about Punisher's special, he tends to help keep that team on its feet. All that being said, just remember that size matters again. And I'm not necessarily against that. Again, Overpowered 2 probably coming to PvE soon. They've kind of said that. This seems like the right time to add it. And what it does is actually adds a level of challenge and enjoyment. Now, as somebody who just did difficulty 9, a completion as a free-to-play level 88, I had some struggles with the danger room, but I do think that when there is a challenge, even though it can be frustrating in the short term, because we haven't really seen these challenges, it can be rewarding as long as you understand the challenge in front of you. If you don't understand what to do to overcome it, then that's the real frustration. There has to be some sort of guidepost and ability for us to understand that. Otherwise, it's just not fun overall. Anyway, so these are just my thought experiment. I do think the new raid is coming probably in the next week. I think once we see Rachel Summers offers, the raid will be out shortly afterwards, and we'll be able to see what it looks like going forward. Again, probably a lot more coming up. Again, these are just projections, and maybe they hold off Overpowered for a little bit just to make sure that they can scale the purple ISO distribution for 4 and 5 to a challenge that makes sense to us. Although I think it's likely to be coming to the Battle World and new raids very, very soon. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I do things so you don't have to. Remember, this account is completely free to play. I'm going to do another set of updates here over the next 24 hours. Love you much. Thanks for watching.